went on for the last 3 days. He called me yesterday and said, "Oh, we're going to shut our down for 20 minutes tonight." So imagine like hooking up equipment and correct power. He says, "Why did they do it?" I said, "Hey, I said, you know, I'm going to shut that thing down and fix another thing. Reconnect." He says, "Oh, okay." He says, "Well, what am I going to do? I don't have a generator." I said, "Store it in. Store it in. But we're going to get a lot of that didn't satisfy me. So I walked in, and I mean, he has so many other young guys in high school. And I said, "You know what?" He says, "You got it. They all have smart phones. Get the number."
Thanks everyone for coming. I'm actually from Mountain Watershed Association, seeing a lot of your faces.
Scott Taylor, Texas Bay Township. We're co-hosting this event, and I just want to thank these fine folks from Jessup, Pennsylvania, for driving in last night to share their stories with us. Obviously, they drove across the state. We're going to gain a lot out of this, and hopefully have a great dialogue with them. Ask questions, please. That's why they're here. Ashley's going to moderate this thing. I'm going to sit over on the side, and I'm actually going to record this, post it on our YouTube channel and website. So if whoever wants to look back and give, say, well, what did they say right at that point, or to that certain question, or tell your friends, neighbors to check it out. This is going to be valuable information to us. Thank you.
And just one logistical thing, we all have mics, so if anyone can't hear, just let us know so that we can make sure we're projecting. The sound is pretty good in here, but this is a note. So, like Scott said, we are welcoming these folks from Jessup, who have been dealing with the gas-fired power plant within their community. And what we're going to do today, since they drove out here, they do have to leave pretty soon, so we're going to have just a short introduction, an overview of questions that we do in a panel format, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. And so, in the beginning, I'm just going to be asking questions, and then hold your questions until the end for that kind of discussion. So first, I just wanted to get it for everyone to introduce yourselves, where you are, where you live in proximity to the plant, and if someone could do an overview of what you've been dealing with in Jessup. In Benergy, the same company that's here, is also the same company within Jessup.
Start with the great, thanks. Hi, I'm Nelda Scasalati. I live in Jessup, Pennsylvania. I'm a little over a half mile from the Benergy plant. Unfortunately, I'll take you my children off the plant. Just get my fuels.
Yeah. That's good.
Jessup, probably about 2,000 feet away from the plant, Jessup, Pennsylvania.
Jason Petrachko. I'm formerly from Jessup, Pennsylvania. My back porch was about 2,000 feet from the facility, and my family, we decided to move while the plant was being constructed.
And I'm Tom Fiorelli. My family lives within the same proximity as well, about a half a mile away from the facility as well.
So, would someone be able to give a timeline of an overview of your situation in Jessup? We're going to get more into depth, but if you could just give an overview.
So we started working on this project about around the beginning of 2015, the end of 2014, when it was advertised that a natural gas power plant was going to be built in our community. We didn't know each other at that point, but when we started to attend meetings, very early on we saw that there was some shortcomings in the process. There was a lack of experts being consulted on the project. Benergy was giving PowerPoint presentations that were highlighting just the benefits of the project without any of the detriments of the project. We asked a lot of questions. We wanted our borough to hire experts to vet the information that they were being given by the facility. It's always been our perspective that clearly the facility is in business. it's their prerogative to portray it in the best possible light. We feel it's our elected officials' responsibility to look at that information and have experts look at it, because certainly no one in Jessup, Pennsylvania was an expert on natural gas power plants until the Inventor came to town. It was brought out very early on that the plant did not fit in the zoning that we had. Where they wanted to build it, it was not zoned for power generation. We had a smaller piece of land in another zone in town where you could build a facility, but not the facility they wanted to build. They alleged that our zoning was exclusionary because it didn't allow for any power generation to be built anywhere in the community. And a hearing was scheduled. It went on for 6 months at least of many, many nights of hundreds of people, well, a couple hundred people showing up. We asked for them to hire professional land use consultants during that process. They failed to do so. They eventually decided that the Borough Council decided that it was exclusionary. And if anything I'm saying is off, or interrupt me at any point. At that point, we worked hard. We proposed our own curative amendment to where they could build a plant. The key element of the fight in that zoning was that they said you couldn't build a power plant on 13 acres that we had available to build a power plant on. We had found where Inventor themselves had proposed and built power plants on 9 acres or less. That evidence was never allowed into the record in our case. We stayed involved when in this particular part of the state, which is a little bit different than I think what's happening in Elizabeth Township. It was allowed as a conditional use. We tried to work with our borough about what kind of conditions should be in place. Again, they hired no experts to vet the conditional use on air quality. Although they said they hired an air quality expert, it's really not accurate. There was one air review of the permit. No one really vetted the permit. We stayed involved with that. They eventually put out, they allowed the conditional use. They offered our town a host agreement that started at $250,000 a year. It went up to $500,000 a year after the fight got more contentious. And then after, as they were going to get their conditional use permit, it went up to $1 million. We stayed involved in the fight. We argued that the money that they were offering was not suitable. It wasn't comparable with what power plants pay out in other parts of the country. We hired our own expert in Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services to research what a proper host agreement is. We delivered that to our council and our school board. We gave presentations about negotiating to get more money, but they never negotiated to push an energy higher. We've stayed involved in the fight. We started doing baseline testing. One of the things that everyone assumes is happening is that your air and water quality, as it is today before a power plant is built, is actually being tested by some agency, but it's not. So we hired our own DEP certified engineer. We've done baseline testing on the creek where the water is going to be discharged. We've done baseline air testing to determine what the air quality is like today. And we've also stayed active in looking at what a host agreement should be for this plant. What should these facilities pay if they're going to be built in communities in Pennsylvania? What we learned is that the Pennsylvania tax structure is very favorable to power plants. It doesn't tax the most valuable part of the facility, which is the equipment. So they're not paying based on value and use. We've been working with our state senator, John Blake, our state representative, Kyle Mullins, and we are working on legislation that will set minimum standards for what a host agreement should be in the state of Pennsylvania to try to even the playing field for communities like ours and like yours.
Can you give an example of what the difference would be for New York and here in the host agreement?
A simple, let's just take windmills, for example. Windmills in New York, we found scholarly reports that mandate $3,000 per megawatt. Now, if a wind farm can pay $3,000 per megawatt to a community, to a local tax base, to the school district, a natural gas plant should easily be able to cover that same cost. The host agreement in the final form that we received was about $666 per megawatt. I believe that you're looking at something around $800 per megawatt for your host agreement. If everything that is showing is what you're going to get in the end. We've had a lot of promises about sewers and such parks that really haven't come fruition. A lot of words. I think the one thing that needs to be said, the most important part of a discussion like this is zoning. You know, having it as a conditional use allows you to set conditions where your host agreement has to be mutually agreeable. You know, just because they offer you a host agreement, what if you don't like it? You have to take it. Mutually agreeable, there's some kind of negotiations. It appears that, I'm not sure what the use is. Here, I believe it's a permitted use. And that might have been a mistake. Well, it was a mistake. And I think companies sometimes take advantage of the thoughts of we're going to help this community out. Well, they're also helping their business out, and the community is the secondary thought.
Can you talk a little bit about the way, like what Energy promised you and how that was different from reality, particularly about the plant size too?
Well, yeah, I mean, the very first meetings, trying to get an idea of what was happening, we would ask, you know, are you going to be able to see this facility from the town? And, oh no, not going to be able to see it from the town. Are you going to be able, is it going to burn methane? Now, we have some large landfills next to us, and methane is a bad word up in Lackawanna County. Oh no, it's not going to burn methane. But when you look at it, I think methane is 97% of what natural gas is. So, you know, are you going to be able to see any plumes? Nope, not going to be able to see any emissions. And you know, in their marketing materials, they mention that we would not be able to see the plant because it'll be behind a mature stand of trees.
One of their flyers.
Because at one point, there was a lot of changes to the facility over time. It's hard to keep up with all these changes. One of the changes was they went from water cooling to air cooling, and as a result of that change, there'll be no visible emissions. Well, I mean, you know, when it's cold, and you know, they said you will see heat shimmer. Heat shimmer. Well, when it's cold, and we all knew that it couldn't possibly be this way. When it's cold, you see the vapor. And so, I mean, there seem to be a lot of things that, as the plant has come to full fruition now, from the marketing days of it to the operation phase, there's a lot of things that just didn't seem to be explained properly. And that's one thing that kind of, if the borough had experts to kind of vet what was being said, you know, maybe some of these things would have came to light, and we'd be able to have a better dialogue, just as far as what we should expect. So, you know, I mean, that's to me one of the most striking, you know, differences as far as what it started out to be and what it said it was going to be and what it actually turned out to be.
So I think, in what it started out to be, I think it's important to note that we've been researching for years and we've always stayed involved. It's only within like the last year or so that we uncovered they had done a zoning change for this power plant back in 2013, which was really 2 years before we were involved, and they had changed the noise ordinance to because there's no way they were going to be able to operate as the ordinance had been written. We eventually found a PowerPoint presentation that they had put on before the borough about that noise ordinance, where they said that their plant was going to be a peaker plant at that time.
It's going to be a what?
A peaker plant? A peaker plant is a smaller plant that only runs at peak times and delivers power to the grid then. And then when we got involved, I think it was about a 1,000 megawatt plant, and ultimately it ended up being a 1,500 megawatt plant. And I think one of the important things there is once you change your zoning to allow for it, plans can change. So what it is today, if it's not etched in stone, it can change.
Yeah. So they're saying 550 megawatts for this plant? but there's nothing keeping them to that megawatt. They could increase.
If you get one turbine in, you can get another turbine in, you can get a third turbine in.
Yeah.
If the acres are there, why not? The gas is coming, the grid is there, the water is there. Why stop at 500 megawatts if you can create 1,500? It started at 900 megawatts, the real heavy push, but it was increased like that.
And with the zoning change of more than 100 acres rezoned, there is potential for them to expand. And with the way that the ordinance is written, nothing can stop that. I was wondering if you all could touch a little bit about on the health impacts and like the air quality and the noise and just the quality of life impacts you've seen.
Well, one thing that you mentioned, the noise, they changed the dBAs to 75 dBAs. We found out just recently that noise monitoring had been done at the plant, and it was done from June to August of this past year. In June and July, there was only one turbine running. August, it's iffy. The second turbine technically came up in September, but in August they were testing that it was possible that there was two turbines running. And looking at the reports, 75 was the dBAs that was changed to. With one turbine running, you were looking at nothing was lower than 60 dBAs for one turbine. What's possibly going to be for three?
How loud? What does that sound like?
I can't really describe what it is. I mean, like, it's annoying. I mean, I hear it at my house.
Yeah, I think they kind of explained it at the time. Oh, it'll be as loud as your dishwasher. 24 hours a day.
No,
But I think some of the dishwashers are 35, 40. So when you're in your house and you turn your dishwasher on.
Well, and I think it has a lot to do with your lifestyle. My hearing is not the best. So it is something that it might not influence me, but one thing that does influence me, even with bad hearing, is my wife's voice telling me I hear the plant. When you look at your quality of life, it can affect you in a lot of different ways, and that is one. My hearing, not so good. My wife's.
Now into like some issues. Sorry. Well, some issues we've had. There was the dust clouds when they were first doing construction, and we notified DEP about them and complained, and they were nice enough to do a violation report for LEC and Energy. They weren't fined anything. Okay, then we get into every month at our council meetings, we have required that one of the Energy representatives shows up and tells what's going on at the plant. So just to keep that in mind, he's there to tell what's going on at the plant. Unfortunately, he doesn't tell the bad parts, he only tells the good parts, how many people are working there. One thing we kept hearing is the plant is over old mines, and we were always afraid of it subsiding. And we kept hearing, well, it's actually happening. Well, finally, on March 5th, one of the representatives, Dan Marks, admitted that he wouldn't give a date or anything, but they were having they had a problem, and that it had sunk. Now, funny, Dan Marks wasn't at the next meeting. Okay. In March, there was an issue there that the smoke was, I don't know if this is in the picture, but smoke was really greenish yellow coming out of the plant. And it actually was affecting you. There's a news article, I was interviewed, and it actually burned my throat and my lungs. And what it was, it lasted for a couple of days. What it turned out to be is they never really advised what it was. What DEP's response was, it was excess NOx that was emitted into the air.
Nitrogen oxide?
Yeah. Okay, then there were 9 reported instances of excessive emissions that we are aware of. I say that because they didn't actually notify us of 8 of them. They actually just notified us of 1 when it actually happened within a day. The others we kind of found out on our own and through a newspaper article. But the limits on the NOx is 2 parts per million. They have exceeded it to 2.1 to 7 times, they've gone to 6.2, they've gone to 2.1. So since from May until January 28th, they have exceeded it 9 times that we are aware of. I'd like to make that point. Now, on December 23rd, there was a horrible noise. It was a Sunday in the morning, about 8 o'clock. It sounded like a jet plane landed in my backyard. And it actually sounded like this throughout the community. People in Archibald, which is the town next to us, were contacting DEP, putting it on Facebook. What is that noise? What's going on? Well, what it was there was a malfunction on one of the valves. 9 million cubic feet of gas was released into our environment over a period of 45 minutes. The malfunction happened at about 8:05 and lasted until about 8:50. Supposedly UGI came up and fixed it. They didn't fix it until 3:39 that day. They did not fix the valve. Now, another thing that from the beginning when they started up there, they do something called steam cleaning, and this is my own personal experience. When they steam clean, instead of the smoke being there, you would see white smoke down where the buildings were. I'm not sure what they used to steam clean, but it was a sicky, sweet smell. And I'd be in my house and wake up in the middle of the night, and I could smell it, and I knew they're doing it again. And this happened basically most of the summer. I had to go out and buy an air filter because I could not stand it anymore. Those are the ones I did.
And you want to talk, so who actually does the monitoring of the plant, and is there any monitoring taking place?
Oh, that's a good one. They self-monitor. They self-monitor. They have monitors that are in the stacks. Unfortunately, they were not required to be calibrated and working until the plant was fully operational. That didn't happen until January 15th of this year. Which means anything that happened beforehand, they really weren't required to even notify the tech about these issues. They must have been doing some kind of monitoring, or how else would they have known they'd seen the knocks on certain days. But I'm not really sure. I can't answer how they did that or how they knew it. They just did. But they weren't really required to do any monitoring. So we're going through all of construction. Construction lasted almost 3 years. And they weren't required to monitor anything while they did.
And then with the water, you said that this is also an air-cooled plant, but is there a water discharge?
There is a water discharge. The discharge location and type has not been established yet. Initially, when the plant was proposed, they were going to be water-cooled, use several million gallons a day and discharge 500,000-600,000 gallons into a creek. When they switched to water cooling, they're now saying their discharge could be 58,000 gallons a day. They were going to put that into the creek. We have always felt that our baseline testing, when combined with the Sierra Club appeal of their NPDES permit, is why they chose not to do that. As of right now, they've been negotiating with the borough publicly on an Act 537 to put it into our sewer system for over a year. And we believe they've been trucking it out to water in the meantime.
Yeah. And that's one thing to know is that Invenergy said here that it was going to be an air-cooled plant and there wouldn't be a water discharge, but that's not true. Even with air-cooled plants, there are still water discharges, and that water, it would either go into the sewer system or it would go into the yacht.
Yes, unless they're using a closed loop system.
Yeah.
And I don't believe, the one thing that we do know is when it says not for construction, that is a true fact. Your preliminary plans are extremely preliminary. And it is my personal opinion, a preliminary plan should not be, you should not be able to develop any zoning off of a preliminary plan when it's such an extreme. Because when you're looking at zoning ordinances for discharging water into a stream, it's vastly different than ordinances you might write for the use of the sewer. And your host agreement, your impact fees might look drastically different. So if you just have preliminary plans and you're trying to see the next move, because you could look at a natural gas plant and they say there's no water discharge. Yes, in a closed loop system. Yep. That doesn't mean you're getting a closed loop system. You could be getting an air-cooled system that has a discharge of thousands of gallons in your local sewer.
Or it could be a water-cooled system. There's
Yeah.
nothing holding them to that.
Yeah, there's nothing. You're exactly right. It could even be more extreme.
Yeah. And to note, just for context, Nebraska, which is down in Smithton, that's a water-cooled system. It discharges. It has a permit of up to 2.1 million gallons a day of 110-degree water into the Allegheny River, which is already a lot of thermal pollution, which we're concerned about as the river keeper. And to put another power plant just 5 miles downriver, we could have a big impact on that.
The one thing that we've done from the beginning is we've looked at to help the overall community in general. When New Energy first came, they were looking at 9 million gallons of water per day. The excess, the available for development in Lackawanna County is 33 million. They were going to use a third of the amount of available water for 30 jobs. 30 jobs. So when you look at the whole context of a development like this, zoning is important. It is the most important. The control mechanisms. We can disagree about the technology. I could be for natural gas power plants. One thing that we can't disagree, being citizens, is the profitability and the protection for the community. We can disagree about technology, but those two main items, everyone should be hand in hand, from council to planning, all the way through. Because when you have that, then you have protection.
So, just while we're in the theme, I just wanted to touch on one thing about their emission credits that they have for your plant. Could you just touch on that?
The emission reduction credits?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you're talking to a person who's totally opposed to them. The reason for that is they say, we're coming into your area, we're replacing coal-fired plants and other things. The emission credits that they are using in Jessup, one section of them came from New York. It was a packaging plant company that closed down over 10 years ago. They have not been emitting anything into the environment for over 10 years. Why would we consider them something that, by putting in energy here and using their credits, it's made it better? We have a reciprocity agreement with Maryland and New York that any of the DRCs could be purchased from either one of them. At least Pennsylvania has a 10-year limit on theirs. However, New York has no limit. And even though this plant was closed for over 10 years, I contacted New York Emission Reduction Department, and they told me all Pennsylvania would have to do was contact them and say, would you update your file? This plant has been closed for over 10 years. And I contacted DEP, and they refused to do it. So,
The one thing about that, it's an emission reduction credit. What that means is that, my understanding is the plant that we have is so large, it could not emit pollution without buying these credits. So not only are we impacted by the size of the facility and the noise and all the different things, but now it's emitting pollution that they're allowed to emit from all these other credits that they bought from around the region. So, you look at impact to the local area. I mean, that's extremely significant and something that we should probably highlight more. How much the facility emits in the form of toxins.
Yeah. I think Rel has that.
and don't you be wild.
Yeah, but yeah, so they're allowed to pollute there for a plant that's been in exchange for a plant that has been closed in New York for over 10 years. So it just doesn't add up entirely.
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually what that's telling you is Lackawanna facility, They knew walking into that council building that they were going to emit more emissions than they were allowed in that local municipality and that county. So what they did, based on a federal program, bought credits from another state. And we're going to have that same issue here. This facility is going to exceed, by design, it exceeds the limits they're allowed here in Allegheny County.
Yeah. Allegheny's already over its limits.
We're already over our limits by far because of U.S. Steel alone. U.S. Steel buys credits from other states just to maintain their viability. And they still pay fines monthly to the DEP and the EPA.
What about your property value?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that question. So could you talk a little bit about how much they've been paying in taxes, if any, how many jobs it's created, and then also what you've seen in terms of the impact to your property?
Well, very early on in the process, as we were doing research, we came across studies from the Berkeley, and also the professor was Dr. Lucas Davis, and he had done modern studies of natural gas plants that showed that, the closer you are to the facility, the more property value depreciation you would experience. But it starts out at about 3% and continues to rise the closer you get to the facility. And primarily, the reason for that is people don't want to live next to them because they don't know what's coming out of the stacks. The larger the facility, the more depreciation that there is. And what seems to be also happening is that people who are not comfortable with that type of facility tend to move away, and it's hard to sell your property for what you paid for it, so you have to reduce the sales price so somebody else will buy it who doesn't mind living next to a facility like that, and that's what causes the depreciation of property value.
And I think it also depreciates in other ways. So you have the community where you have families moving out, leaving a place they established to start a family. But you also have families that might fight their local property tax. So, in essence, by citing a plan within the visual distance, instead of a golf course, instead of a lake, instead of a beautiful river, they have a legitimate argument. You've affected my property value, why am I paying more to the school district? They argue that it hurts the school district. The money paid in property tax by the power plant might not be enough to compensate if you have a wonderful development with $50,000, $400,000 homes. That could be an incredible hit to a school district if you have the property tax being lowered. I know there's a lot of ways that people want to get rid of property tax, but that's the horse we're using on the farm now, and it is going to take a hit when you locate these facilities. So everybody needs to be compensated correctly to not have that impact within your community.
And by the way, Invenergy never heard of those studies before. Did you ever hear of these studies that are showing, peer-reviewed studies that show the impact? No, we never heard that before. Then later on in the process, they had people that said that we were taking that out of context. That was the only, you're taking it out of context. Well, how? Well, you're just taking it out of context. So, you cannot fight with these types of billion-dollar corporations without hiring experts to level the playing field. Right? You can't do it.
You need a tax expert. You need a real estate expert. They had a real estate expert that came to a meeting to describe how, no, it's going to enhance your property value. Actually, regular citizens, regular property owners that buy and sell homes, have you ever said, look at this great view of a power plant? He had no answer. But because he was classified as an expert, his weight holds a lot more than a citizen. It's sad to say, but that's where it's at. If you don't have the experts vetting every word, every contract, you're at a disadvantage.
One thing, Tom, you would be good at this. Did you explain to them about Berryville, how it wasn't going to affect our property values, but somehow it affects Rhode Island?
Yeah. Another location where Energy is proposing a plant that hasn't been approved yet is up in Burrillville, Rhode Island. And right about the same time, they were talking with Jessup about, the different amenities, and well, there's nothing but a disamenity on our that we see. But in Burrillville, Rhode Island, they offered the residents a property value agreement, where that if they signed up, if a resident signed up, and they went to sell their property, and their property value went down, Invenergy would, compensate them the difference. So that's also another thing, we did not get that, but that's something that may be important for you guys to ask for somewhere along the line, to protect property. So there were actually three options. If you signed up for the property valuation agreement, you received a check for
$1,800.
in that time ballpark. If you refused to sign up, or you didn't want the agreement, but you signed off that you would not seek any type of action for property value appreciation, they gave you a check for $5,000. And then the third option was you didn't have to sign on to either.
$5,000 for someone that might need a new roof, new windows, medication, that might be in a home that they have to live in. They don't have the option to sell the house and to move. They're here for the long haul. They're committed. That $5,000 was missed by Jessup. And when you looked at the area that it affected, there were thousands of people there where $5,000 could have made a difference. Your house sale, $1,800 makes a difference in that.
So, again, while Burrillville was talking to Invenergy about this stuff, Jessup, we're not aware of what they were talking, but we know that Burrillville received this type of offer, Jessup did not, all within the same time frame. So the bottom line is, don't think that Invenergy is going to offer these things unless you ask for them.
And Burrillville had experts.
Well,
They had experts in every facet.
On the minute.
If you bring it up, they're going to probably say that the tax structure is different in Rhode Island. Things are different there. And if your township doesn't have an expert, you're at a disadvantage. If you have an expert, then things are different. And that's really the theme of every one of these elements, is that having your town have an expert is really important.
And the belief is that, well, experts are going to cost you money. We heard this many times from the sitting council members. They're not going to lie to us. They're building $1 million plant. They don't want. They want a good vibe, and they want everyone to be on the same page. They want people to back this. They're not going to lie. They're not going to be. They're going to give the full answer, and I believe they do give a full answer, but it's said in a way that offers them some protection. And because we didn't look at the whole package, Jessup and some very brave people might have trusted a little bit more than they should have. And I think that failed them in the end. It comes down to expert, because you will get that money back. It might not be that day that you write a check for $35,000, but in 2 years, you might receive a check back for $80,000 that fully covers that, and it'll be an ongoing payment because of the work they do.
Just quick, could you say the taxes you've gotten and the jobs that it's created for people in Jessup?
Taxes, it's KOZ, we're not getting any taxes, we won't be for years. Jobs, there were construction jobs, and it was pushed that jobs for Jessup. Majority of the construction workers were from out of town, and not the next town, way out of town. We had people coming in from Europe to work in the plant. They're going to do all this here, invest so much in your town because they're going to go to lunch and dinner and everything else, and your small business is going to benefit. Did they? How many people are going to be left after the plant opens? 30 workers. Are they 30 workers that they gave us a list of the qualifications for the jobs when they first came? There wasn't anyone in Jessup that qualified for any of those jobs. So of those 30 jobs, how many of those people will be local residents?
There were a few that were hired that were local.
Yeah.
But the overall arc is do 30 jobs, and then to say there's another 30 that work as subcontractors doing landscaping, snow removal, and all of that. Does that balance out? What is a coal facility run? 400 jobs? A nuclear facility running 1,100 people that have to live in the community, that pay taxes within the community. It's like those plants where something might be coming offline. Those 30 jobs mean a heck of a lot more in a community where there's a coal plant and the infrastructure and everything is right there than it does in a community that has no displacement of a energy facility.
Could you talk about now getting into what you all did? So talk about the sentiment in Jessup now, like how many people do you think are for or against it, and then also what you've been doing in politics in your town and how that has changed after the plan has been approved.
Well, I'll just say this, don't be disparaged in your efforts if people aren't speaking up, because people are in general afraid to speak up. But where we found people weren't afraid to speak up was in the voting booth. So in the voting booth. So I don't know if we could put a percentage of how many people were for or against it. I'd say 80% of the town was against the facility. If I had to put a number. But we were able to change the elected officials, and and we worked hard at that, and that's very important.
They tried to categorize what we were doing as just 20 dopes who were yelling online and showing up at meetings and causing trouble, fear mongering, spreading misinformation. But as Tom says, right now it's important to note that the state representative who brought this facility and sold it to us at a town hall meeting is no longer in office. Of the council members who voted for this project, there's only one who's still in office, and she'll be running for re-election this primary. People who were sympathetic to our cause and worked with us have become the majority of our council. And that's important, because that means that even though you sometimes feel like no one cares or no one hears you, you have to keep putting your message out there, and you have to stay on facts, stay on protection, stay on maximizing the benefit for your community, stay talking about experts, because people are listening. Not everybody's going to go out and talk about it, but that's how you can really change the future dynamic of your community.
We are not experts, but we do know how to ask for them, and we do know how to look for them, and that is the difference. I believe our representative that was replaced probably had a talented future ahead of him, and he could have done some great things. He was misled in a little bit of how great this was going to be accepted. The colors were brighter and everything was better than it actually was. And I have a little sympathy for him, because he could have made a difference. Our council could have made a difference. We've got legislation that's being worked on that will be introduced where communities won't have to fight this way for protection, and they will be compensated, and will be appropriately placed.
Yeah, what we have is the York splits two different counties. The other side of the river is Westmoreland, we're in Allegheny. On the other side, where they're going to put the plan at is Westmoreland. We had a big town meeting where everybody was to come and voice their opinions. They would not listen to anybody that was not in this township.
I've seen in other communities in other states, and I don't know if it would work here, but I've seen where they have filed injunctions in the process to say, you're impacting us. Let us have a seat at the table. Let us have a seat at the table for our host agreement. Our vision, our school district is going to be impacted. More people to speak, I think you get a better overall product.
Well, they're trying to shut us down.
Yeah.
quiet. That's like I said, you have people directly across the river from it. They would not let them voice an opinion or nothing.
And I will say with that is because that zoning hearing was a change in Elizabeth Township zoning. But if this decision under zoning is appealed and it goes before the zoning hearing board, then people from Sutersville would be able to talk. So because they would be able to say this affects us and moving forward with that. It was just the way that unfortunately Regina's kind of strong-armed that decision. But I think that in most places they should be able to talk as it affects them.
And also I want to add on the side of this, I've never had a problem going out to eat in my community. I've never felt, I feel like we're on the right side of history on this. And I think that that's what people need to realize in political office, planning and zoning. Be on the right side with the community. Life is a lot easier. It's a lot easier to say, I hired an expert. This is what they told me. I'm not going off of anybody else's opinion than my expert.
Yeah. And I did want to open it up to questions just with time. So thank you all for everything you shared. Questions from the audience?
What kind of government structure you have there, home rule, or
We
is
have
it
a borough council.
borough council, you have a mayor?
Yes.
And you have council.
Seven councils.
Former council member, person running.
Did you find where you were at that there were other communities that wanted the power plant and they just turned them down flat? Help and settle with Jessup?
If energy came to Archibald, there's actually
And that's a community right next to us.
right next to us. They are zoned 487 acres for power plants, specifically a power park. They were invited to Jessup through KOZs to help a developer. They brought, and then when it was going to be placed in Archibald, it was a lot better location and a lot smaller plant. Are there communities that want power generation? I believe there are communities that want power generation. And if they actively want power generation, I think where a coal plant was, or where other power generation was, they should be given the chance first to build as an economic development plan, where you get continuing ed classes, you get this power plant placed there. To cite it in a place that hasn't had the development previously doesn't make sense.
Well, they've been asked to some surrounding communities where it was zoned for industry, they had ready access to water, electricity, rail, and they turned them down flat. They wanted Elizabeth Township for some reason.
I'm sorry. I mean, once again, it's the whole idea. Protection of profitability. It doesn't, there's a balance. There's a balance.
Can I ask you, I mean, it gets real negative. I mean, I'm sitting here, my heart's going like this, okay? I'm a 14 miles from what the proposed power plant location. And I guess I want you, if you can, to give me maybe your top three, maybe one, maybe two, of success stories as far as how you worked, and you could say, we did this, and we did that. I think when you're here where we are, it'd be really, really nice to think that all the work and time that we've been putting in will show some sort of
I think we believe that there are many things that happen because of the work we put in. And we've kind of touched on some of them, but maybe not to give the context to it.
Okay.
When they were first proposed, they were going to use our clean drinking water to the tune of 6 to 9 million gallons a day, using a significant amount of our surplus drinking water. That's a big environmental hit. And we believe, and always felt, it was because of our opposition that they changed to air cooling, which brought their water usage down to, under 1 million a day. And one of the reasons we believe that is that they unveiled that plan change the night that the curative amendment hearing started, where they were going to try to get their zoning changed. We believe that happened. We believe that they were going to discharge the water into the creek, and that because we commissioned baseline testing, and funded it out of grant money in our own pockets, is one of the reasons that they decided that, you know what, we're not gonna discharge it to that creek anymore, because we know what the quality of that water is now, and we will be able to know what it's like after they're discharging into there. We believe that the host agreement that was offered in the beginning got increased throughout the way because we remained steadfast, showed up at every meeting, argued about what was right and not, and we believe that helped bring that amount of money up. We think that it's important that we change the complexion of our council. We found that our elected officials were not serving the interests of the community, so we found people and we replaced them. And we also, because we've stayed in it after it happened, we're working on legislation now with our representatives that's going to be introduced, and it's potentially going to make an impact on every other community across the state where one of these plants is going to be built. Not just in monetary gain, but also in protections. So many times, the four of us here and many of the people back home wanted to quit. Every one of us wanted to quit. When we had to give up our zoning appeal because of the threat of sanctions against our property and our homes, many of us wanted to quit, but it took conversation saying, you know what, if we quit now, they win. Because that's what they expect. They expect that people are going to come out and oppose it, and when they finally win, everyone's going to go home. Well, if we went home, we wouldn't be working, we wouldn't have new council members who are now able to watch the plant and keep an eye on what's going on and keep us informed. We wouldn't have potential legislation. So it always feels like you should quit, and it always feels like it's hopeless, and you're giving up time with your family, and you're running from your job to a meeting, and maybe you just want, I just want to go home and watch a movie and relax, But we're meeting, at one of our houses to talk about what the next thing to do is, and it always feels hopeless, but there's always incremental change and improvement.
And one thing that I think you can take from here is you guys are in a better place than we are. You've got a primary that's right down the road. You don't have a shovel in the ground, and you've got people involved. And all you need to do is find the candidates and talk to the people that are on council now. And say, listen, there are avenues that we can work together. Because one of the biggest wins we have is we've got the council, and future development now is a little bit more controlled. And you can put residential first, you can put residents first. I mean, I think the same location that they want to site the power plant has amazing ability to be a housing development. And I don't quite understand the need or the rush to place a heavy industry in a place where residential units would help the tax base in the school district.
I can see now why 4 of our council members voted this in. We have a sewage problem. Right on the top of the list, we're gonna give $25 million for sewage. They're gonna give money for this. The road that goes to it is closed. The street goes right past our house. Oh, they're gonna fix the road for us. So right off the bat, all they're looking at is the money is gonna do this stuff here, and not what it's gonna do to the people of the township.
Well, the thing, if you're going to look at it economically, and I can understand that, but don't leave money on the table. If they're going to give you $25 million for the sewer, and you know there's legislation coming where the amount of money you could gain or the protections you could gain, or making it a conditional use, well, why not strive for that?
This is easier.
Well,
That solves all their problems.
What's the first key? Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to say one thing. One thing that we observed is there was tremendous political pressure coming down from the upper levels of the parties. Tremendous political pressure.
How far out?
Right to the top.
I mean, political levels, like our governor?
No, higher. Yeah, yeah. There was tremendous political pressure coming down on everybody to get this passed, and such a good thing. So, but ultimately, the control lies here. The control lies with you guys. So, if there's one thing that I would say to try to focus on is, you know, getting candidates that are more sympathetic to, you know, the protection of the town and so on. That's the one thing I would say, because there is, you don't see it, but there's a lot of political pressure on these people making these decisions.
Well, our first expert, well, one of the first experts I talked to about, he was a host agreement attorney, and he heard 1,500 megawatts, and he's like, wow, that's huge. And I told him the first host agreement that they offered, and he laughed. Not like a laugh, like one of those from your stomach that, like, you just heard the funniest joke that you've ever heard. The one that you can't control, like how embarrassing of an offer. And he was a great fellow, and he could not take our case. He couldn't look at it because he worked for Inventor. He's very, very good attorney. But he gave some pretty legal advice. And he said, Mr. Smith, I wouldn't take the first offer, and I wouldn't take the second offer, and I wouldn't take the third offer. And that's the negotiation process here. We're in the very beginning. Pennsylvania is completely different than other states. So I can't, counsel, the experts, the protection.
With this presentation that's going to be made tomorrow, okay, 25 million, okay, great, you're going to fix your sewers and all. First of all, it doesn't say anything about these here loans continuing yearly. Is this a one-shot deal, period? And that 25 million is not 25 million, it's whatever it costs, so it could be less than 25 million.
They won't tell us anything.
Yeah, but the one thing that might help, that we discussed earlier, was why don't you look into host agreements in other areas and show the comparison? This really, except for that 25 million, these other figures are ridiculous.
We're thinking there's other things involved, whether it's jobs, money, what, we don't know. Yeah.
Well, I do know one thing, that a lot of the same thoughts were happening around our representative. His energy wasn't there for him. When he lost his job, they weren't there for him.
He lost his house.
Now, they will be friends with the politicians, they'll be friends, they will be close. But I can't say that they will be there for them, you know, in the end. But I know one thing, you guys all know somebody that can run for council in the 5th or the 7th ward or the 3rd ward or whatever wards are up. You guys all know somebody that can fill those seats, and you just gotta locate that person and make this a conversation.
Something else, we had 2 fire companies suggested, and one fire company basically totally supported this up front. The fire company was located right adjacent to railroad tracks, and they had negotiated with the fire company that they would use their property to unload the turbines and the equipment and pay the fire company for this. And it was a substantial amount of money, and the firefighters supported the energy plan completely. When everything was approved, they totally threw that out the window and went with the adjoining property, which belonged to the gentleman who they were purchasing the land from. They went to him, they used his property, they unloaded everything from his side, and the fire company did not get what they were promised. And it was a substantial amount.
I think we take one more question and then we're gonna wrap up just for time. But people will hang out and we'll eat and everything, but just one more question.
What kind of toxins are in the emissions? What do they do to us? Are they toxic to us, or is it just something that irritates?
What PMs we have fixed?
Well, I mean, there's gases. This is the way it was explained to us at the meetings by their experts. There's gases, and you know, gases are lighter than air in general, so the gases are going to dissipate and be gone, which is probably true. But the particulates are heavier than air, and gravity will take them down within a certain perimeter of the plant. And I asked the question, I said, so we don't have a facility that emits particulates now. We're going to have a facility that emits particulates in the future. If we don't have them now, but we're going to have them in the future, how does that improve our air quality? and I mean, then he said, well, see, sir, you don't understand, because this plant is going to close a coal plant out in Ohio somewhere, and you're not going to get the emissions from there. Like our closest coal plant was 60 miles away, and you had mentioned in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. So there's just all kind of things like that, where here we are, you know, we're just lay people heading, you know, head to head with these heavy hitters trying to, you know, but the bottom line is I am truly concerned about particulate matter.
And they'll fall back on the permit because they'll get an air quality permit. The best way I've ever heard it explained to me is the air quality permit measures what comes out of the stack, and that's what it's about. But it has nothing to do with where it falls.
And so looking at that, there's volatile organic compounds, there's nitrogen oxides. Those all, I mean, those can trigger asthma and different respiratory issues within people. There's
percentage of like cancer or something?
VOCs can be a carcinogen. I would have to look at the permit, but I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that as well.
Ashley, just one more question.
Yeah.
Did you all, if anything, structure any type of instructional campaigns, town hall meetings, any type of information that you could put out there to the public while it was still in the construction stage? And if so, can you talk about any of the failures, any of the obstacles, any of the successes rising from that?
We did not have any formal town halls that
We had political debates. We talked at different councils in Archibald during their zoning issues. They were looking at permitted use versus conditional, and they went to conditional. We were invited guests. So we did a little bit of that. Some of our failures as a group, getting too personal.
That's number one.
No.
It's hard to keep everybody on the reservation. You know, there's always going to be people out there that are going to say things that you can't control. But sometimes it reflects poorly on the group. You know,
when you can have a conversation and have a disagreement with someone about certain facts, but be able to discuss other facts where there's a middle ground, you're part way there. And that's where this conversation has to happen. It has to happen with good quality council candidates and an open conversation. It smells bad when we try to stymie free speech. That just doesn't make sense.
I know that's the last question, 3 questions. but you said that there was cause, so there's no taxation money to cause the cost, but there was a host agreement. How much money has been given from the host agreement at this point in time?
At this point in time, the host agreement, I'm not one of with the exception of 250, let me finish, with the exception of during construction, which construction runs to 3 years, we received $250,000 2 years, because they didn't even put the host agreement, wasn't even set up that you would get 250 every year. You're going to get 250,000 twice a year. The host agreement was set up that it was when you started to, how was it word, a commission, when they started commissioning?
commercial operation.
Commercial operation. The first turbine on this plant opened in June of 2018. The second around September. The third in January. Okay, you would assume we should have started receiving money in June when the first turbine came up. Sign thing. Started asking when you were paying us, We were told by the attorney from the Energy at one of the council meetings, you'll have your first check January 19th. And now, first of all, it was $1 million it's set up to be paid. $1 million is for the first 5 years, $400,000 extra. It's going to be paid in 4 installments. Now we're finding out that, well, no, that's not how it works. It's at the end of the quarter where we start doing it full operation, and then you've got to wait 30 days for it. So we're not going to see a penny before probably April 30th, and of that $1 million, you're looking at $250,000 of the $1 million, because it'll be 4, and 100,000 out of 400.
And if this sounds confusing, it's because it is. And this is why you need an expert in contract negotiation, because when we felt that commercial operation was the day they started selling to the grid, they now argue that that is not what commercial operation means. So when we thought the money would be here by now, it's not. And because of the way the contract was written, our council is left with very little power to enforce anything otherwise.
When your solicitor tells you that it is simple contract law, that's not true. It's not. You can take that to the bank that it's not simple contract law.
Okay, just look, really last question.
I have more of a comment. Last time when I was here, I'm somewhat both new to the township and new to this group. But we had a fellow here, Chad, last time from the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. And going to their website, I noticed that they offer something called Democracy School, which is a training that they offer for approximately 25 people that occur on Friday night and then a good chunk of Saturday. And it teaches you how to utilize all those aspects of government and so on, and how they come together. I think possibly, I know it would be useful for me, and maybe there is some other people here for whom that would be useful.
That is really important, because if you get your council seats filled, you get your planning and your zoning, a community can be developed in a way a community wants to be developed. Right now, if people are not active within the democracy, it's being run by a very few. And the dates, what are the dates? April, so like we have signature dates.
Signature dates on March 12th. That's an honorary, I assume, everything's basically the same.
Yeah.
Petitions in by March 12th.
So you have time on the clock. You have time
It
on the
takes
clock.
like 2 hours to get 10 signatures. That's all you need on a petition.
And
10
it's with us.
signatures by the party that you're running on.
One other quick thing to keep enthusiasm going here is I would be very interested in starting some sort of reading group. If anyone would be interested in that, to keep our morale up on these issues. I do have a book in mind. It is by an author by the name of Thomas Berry, and it's called The Dream of the Earth. So if anyone's interested in that, my name's Dennis McAndrew. See me after.
Our group changed when we said we're not just going to be against something, we're going to be for something. And when you are for something, how can they be against you? So I would recommend being for something, whether it's Easter egg hunts, whether it's Halloween parties. Be for something. It works.
It increases your membership, your involvement, and we are doing it.
Sir, are you familiar with the power plant that you can see off of Route 31 up here?
We told them about it. That's a Nebraska plant.
Yep.
The size of your power plant, is it compared to the same as the one on?
1,500 megawatts
Yeah,
it's
is the
about the
largest
same.
in there.
About the same?
We're
That was huge.
We're the biggest in the
All right,
nation,
now,
I think.
Two things then, all right? When they made your power plant, who paid for the roads, the new roads that have to go into it? Because where ours is, there's no roads. Secondly, all right, there's 3 things. The power lines. Who negotiated where they go? Because that power plant has huge power lines all over the place. Third thing, we don't have any water there down where that is. If there's a fire, emergency or something, isn't that against the law?
Planning, zoning, FERC, and the reason.
Well, they bypassed the zoning.
Planning will be where you get your firemen, the ordinance are already there. Looking at why our infrastructure, it was the perfect, I don't know if you guys are aware of it, the Jessup deal was the #1 deal in the world as far as for power generation. It won awards because the infrastructure, the roads, they literally at the end of a road put a power plant right on top of people where the power lines were there, and they had all the gas lines right there. They had the infrastructure, they had permits, they had everything.
There's none of that down.
Yeah, so they're gonna have to build it all. So we were talking earlier, like, we're gonna, what is their trucking route? Are those roads gonna need to be extended? They're gonna have to take people's properties to build the roads. I think those are all questions that we have to ask because those are unknowns right now. so I'm gonna wrap it up and let